Hey, I'm Osman Faruqi, and this is The Drop, a culture show from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, where we dive into the latest in the world of pop culture and entertainment. I'm here with Thomas Mitchell and Mel Cambry. How you doing, guys? What's up?
Not too much. Just, good to be back together. We spent a lot of time together this week, actually.
We have.
It's funny looking at you guys on the screen. We spent quite a bit of time together this week, which is really nice. And now we're separated again.
It is, but distance makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. So I'm sure next time we're all in one room, we'll enjoy it even more.
Correct.
Well, you know what makes the heart grow fonder is watching movies in cinemas with you together for the very first time ever in our lives, in our professional lives, in our personal lives. We all went to the movies together to watch something collectively. It was Dev Patel's directorial debut, Monkey Man. We're going to have a bit more to say that in a couple of weeks closer to the release. This is a big, crazy, fun, wild film, but we'll keep the powder dry. I think the most interesting thing to say about this is I got another insight into the world of our man, Thomas Mitchell. You are like the mayor of these screenings, my friend. You are kissing babies, shaking hands, wandering around, jumping up and down the aisles, saying hello to people. What is the go with that?
Jumping up and down the aisle.
Walk in, you're like, hey there, and you over there. Hello, hello.
Look, I have a lot of friends, so don't blame me for being a social guy, and I'm a man of the people. It's good to get out there and meet the other people that get invited to these things. And yes, there happen to be lots of people that I knew from different walks of life.
It is always good going to an event with you because I feel like I have quite bad facial recognition, I think. And if I don't know who someone is or I'm curious, you're like a human Google search. I can just be like, who is that person? Why do I know that person? And you are on it. And then you're probably making your way over there to chit chat as well.
Correct, yeah. It's good to, it's just like, it's important to know people and to catch up with people. So yeah, it's basically a mini reunion for me every time I go to a screening.
That's lovely.
Would you say there was a oversaturation of your friends at this particular screening, or is that what it's like for you all the time?
I'm always surrounded by people I know everywhere I go. No, actually, one of the guys, he's like a movie guy. So that's like what he does on Sunrise. So he's like basically at every single screening. Shout out to Jason Jabba Davis of Band in a Box fame from
this is
back in the day.
Oh, like Jabba from like Pizza Jabba. Oh, that was Jabba. That's cool.
He actually loves this podcast, so he'll be very excited that we're talking about him.
This is how you get so many friends from doing shout outs like these. Like exactly. This is the secret.
Do you want to just list every other friend you spoke to?
Yep. So there was Gary Liu from Boss Hunting, who I once.
Okay, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this.
Osman, I have a question. You know, in the past, I've spoken a lot about Thomas's etiquette at the cinemas. How did you find him because you sat directly next to him as a movie companion?
Yeah, well, one of the things that did stand out to me this time around, and I was going to ask you about it, and I thought I'll save it for when we are talking in front of microphones. You do check your phone a lot. Like, did you have a home situation? Were you bored in the movies, or is it just a thing you do, like a nervous
I knew this was going to come up because I felt you catch me a few times. It was a combination of two things. I was texting my wife a lot because she was kind of like, "What time are you coming home?" No, she wasn't busting my balls, but she was like, "How's it going? What time are you coming home?" And then I was feeling very tired last night, so I was like, kind of checking the time. I think I Googled at one point Monkey Man runtime to be like, what are we looking at here? As we were into the latter half of the movie. But yes, I do check my phone often because I've got lots of friends contacting me who aren't in the cinema.
And you do know, Oz, like Thomas brought us into disrepute at the June screening, right? Looking at his phone so much.
I do.
The security guard.
I got kicked out. Yeah. This is an issue with him. Look, well, we will talk more about Monkey Man and perhaps Thomas's phone etiquette down the track. But today on the show, there's only really one thing happening in the world of media, culture, celebrity at the moment. That is the scandal over the alleged, I guess we'd say, disappearance of Kate Middleton, the royal princess, the future queen. It's not the kind of topic we, I guess, generally have weighed into, but we realized this week that it's kind of all we were talking about. It's all most of the people in our lives were talking about. And I think it sort of says something about the way that like we consume and talk about celebrity now, the way things move so fast. Kate had this long absence from public life that I'll admit I was not completely across, but then we got this bizarre proof of life photo, accusations that had been digitally altered, an admission that had been digitally altered. There is a lot to unpack, I think, here. And I think this is not just going to be a gossip session on the Royals, if that's what you're worried about. There'll be a little bit of that maybe, but generally we're going to look at this from the perspective of why an event like this seems to have captured the imagination of so many people, and whether or not it's a good thing, or maybe it speaks to a kind of hollowness in our society and culture of them. We'll get there. We'll get there. Before we get into the big one, we cover the Oscars on a special episode on Monday. So if you want to go back and listen to that for some more in-depth takes, please feel free. But I think it's always good to talk about these things with a bit more distance. When the dust has settled, we can sort of look at the reaction to the reaction, if you like. One of the things that has come in since today and Monday are the ratings. So on sort of linear broadcast TV in America, the Oscars attracted just under 20 million viewers, which is actually their biggest result in 4 years. And not bad when you consider what a big proportion of the US population is. How do those numbers feel to you guys? It's kind of what you expected. Did you expect it to be bigger with the the additional Barbie Oppenheimer factors?
No, I reckon best results in 4 years. That's kind of their best since post-COVID. Makes sense given the calibre of the cast. There were so many films stacked with really big popular figures. Multiple ones of these films had real ensemble casts. So it kind of makes sense to me that they've probably got a wider audience than usual. They've got the Barbie heads, the Oppie heads. They've kind of been able to capture quite a big demographic compared to other years.
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes sense. I'll be curious to see what happens next year. Like, I do think that, as you all know, it for me wasn't a great Oscars. And so, the audience has now like committed to it and watched it, but like whether or not then next year you get a hangover from, people are like, well, I watched the Oscars for the first time in 4 years and it was a bit boring. So like, will I go back? I don't know.
Yeah, but all the June heads will be tuning in.
That's true, of which there are a lot.
I think one of the reasons that like ratings are so tricky these days, we talk about this with TV, right? Most people, even if there's a show like say Survivor or Married at First Sight that broadcasts on television, a lot of people, particularly younger people, are watching that on a streaming platform, which isn't captured, in the kind of old school rating system. But I feel similarly with the Oscars. Like there may not just be people streaming it on whatever digital platform it's streaming on, whatever country they live in, but people can basically watch the Oscars in real time on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, because you just see people cut little videos. The Oscars shares speeches and the musical performances on YouTube as well. So I feel like that increase, which is the biggest in 4 years, but not the biggest overall, and certainly not as big as the heyday, in the olden days, doesn't actually quite capture how much of a phenomenon this is, because my guess would be most people who don't work in the industry, who are under the age of like 35, wouldn't be anywhere near a TV for the Oscars. They would just be watching it on social media where it pops up on their feeds.
Yeah, I think that's completely right, that these figures ignore the import it has kind of in other forms, or people will just be consuming the stories about it. Or we know our live blog was very popular. People are probably reading the live blog but not watching the Oscars on TV. So I don't think the viewer numbers are necessarily a kind of useful tool in the importance and relevance of the Oscars because, yeah, as you're saying, I think people are accessing it and engaging with it in entirely different ways to in the past.
Yeah, I feel like they used to do a thing where they would do like, I remember when I was young, I'm sure they used to do like they would cut an episode, like a shorter version of it, and it would run at prime time on like Channel 9 or whatever when we were younger.
They did do that. They did do that on 7 this year, 8:30. There was a Oscars sort of live event. I actually haven't looked at the ratings for that. Would be interesting to see how that was. But again, I doubt that is attracting, anyone under the age of like 40 or 45.
Yeah, like the ceremony itself, it's kind of, to sit and watch 3 hours of it or even an hour and a half of it is a lot, like without also some of the red carpet and other bigger moments that they might have cut out for that broadcast.
The other thing that's happened in the last couple of days since the awards, Al Pacino, Thomas, your guy, has, I guess, sort of been forced to issue an apology. This goes back to his announcement of the Best Picture winner, which is the ultimate category. It's the finale of the evening.
10 wonderful films were nominated, but only one will take the award for Best Picture. And I have to go to the envelope for that, and I will. Here it comes. And my eyes see Oppenheimer. Yes. Yes. Emma Thomas, Charles Grodin.
We talked a bit about how he kind of fumbled. It wasn't really clear whether he was announcing Oppenheimer or if he was about to announce all the Best Picture nominees. So people were sort of annoyed at him for two reasons. One, he didn't list all 10 nominees. And two, it wasn't really clear or direct when he announced that Oppenheimer had won. It now turns out that the producers of the awards made the decision for him to not announce all 10. They basically said, well, we unveiled them throughout the course of the ceremony. Everyone knew who they were. So for time reasons, we didn't need Pacino to just rattle off all 10. And maybe they were also worried, given, his propensity to just go a bit rogue, that things might have gotten out of hand if he started just talking about his feelings on Anatomy of a Fall or whatever. But Al Pacino has issued a written apology. He says, there seems to be some controversy about my not mentioning every film by name last night before announcing the Best Picture award. I just want to be clear that it was not my intention to omit them, rather a choice by the producers not to have them said again, since they were highlighted individually throughout the ceremony. I realize being nominated is a huge milestone in one's life, and to not be fully recognized is offensive and hurtful. I mean, we're at this point where Pacino is putting out PR drafted apologies. Does this feel necessary? I'm interested in your view, Thomas, on this as a guy who has been a staunch Pacino defender.
I do love Pacino, and I think I said the other day, give him a break. He's a new father and probably very tired, and also he's 200 years old, so he's also very tired from that. I mean, I think what's funny is, Pacino is 83, Warren Beatty is 86, but was over 80 when he had his slip up. I think maybe the message for the Oscars is, let's stop really old guys do the biggest announcement of the night because they're easily confused.
No, I completely disagree. He was the winner from the Oscars for me, and I'm so saddened to see such a great man brought to issue this apology. He did the right thing not naming all the films. We're just talking about how long it was. We didn't need them all, and his performance was the one piece of kind of unscripted gloriousness from the Oscars. It was the moment we all said the Oscars need more of, a bit of ad-libbing. So I really feel Pacino should not have issued an apology. He did a good job. He did the best job of the night.
I mean, maybe we're talking a lot today about the machine that is, Hollywood, or when you're a superstar celeb. Pacino has a memoir coming out later this year. Is it beyond the realm of possibility that his team were why don't we make ourselves a moment here, and then shortly after that we can, get people talking about Al Pacino again, and then his memoir comes out and,
I mean, it's a really good point. The PR statement went out announcing the memo the day after the Oscars, or maybe even the later on in that night. It's called Sonny Boy. It's a story. It's a bit weird, I guess. That timing is obviously not coincidental, and it's certainly interesting that he's made a moment of it to be discussed, so that's worked well for him. Yeah, that's a good point, Thomas. I wouldn't be surprised if he just thought, what's something I can do to really ham it up to make sure people remember me at the end of this ceremony?
It is funny, but what is the actual process of picking who reads the Best Picture winner? Because it's not is there a method to it?
Well, my understanding is that every year the Academy appoints a different producer. It's been big directors like Steven Soderbergh in the past. This year it was a Canadian producer called Raj Kapoor. Don't know that much about them, and I imagine there's some consultation with other heavyweights in the Academy, but it always does feel a bit random. It's they all make sense in the sense that Warren Beatty is a big figure. That makes sense, but is a big figure, but doesn't really seem any reason why it would be him this year and not last year or in 5 years.
Yeah, it's weird. But look, I mean, as you said, Mel, it was one of the more interesting moments. But I still feel Pacino, he's the guy has form, but this wasn't his finest moment on stage.
Well, look, if it was any hint of what's to come in the memoir, I will be reading Sonny Boy come October.
I hope they have to reprint the memoir to include his apology and his fallout. That could be a fun little addendum. You guys made fun of me earlier in the week for guessing that June Part 2 would be up for a whole bunch of Oscar nominations next year, because we were literally hours out of this year's ceremony. So I thought, why not take your laughter and sort of double down on this idea of trying to predict what movies might be Oscar contenders this time next year. We have no idea, let's be honest. We have no freaking idea whatsoever. There were movies that came out past lives that no one expected to catch the Oscar waves. There were movies that got nominated and won awards, like Anatomy of a Fall, that weren't even on anyone's release radars this time last year. So let's be very upfront. this is a fool's errand. We are not genuinely predicting the victory of these kinds of movies, but it's an interesting one to have a look at, and maybe just for people listening who are just curious to know what big name, big director, big actor releases are coming up in 2024 that could be part of the race next year. Is this worth doing? Do you think this makes sense, or are you just indulging Crazy Oz wanting to talk about some movies he's excited about?
Look, as long as we don't need to revisit June, I'm keen for this discussion. And in 1 year, we will come back and we'll see how right or wrong we are.
That'll be fun. It'd be fun to play back the excitement I have in my voice when I talk about these films. Well, the first one is the one I'm both very excited about that could go very well, or it could be a complete mess. It is a film called Megalopolis, directed by Francis Ford Coppola from the Godfather trilogy fame and Apocalypse Now fame. He's been working on this movie for a very, very, very long time. He has basically sold and mortgaged off his winery and all his assets to make it come true, make it be brought to life. It stars Adam Driver, Forrest Whitaker, Natalie Emmanuel, John Voight, Lawrence Fishburne, Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, Jason Schwartzman, amongst many others. The concept for this movie is crazy. It's about some architect who builds a new crazy futuristic city. That's kind of all we know, but we know that Coppola has got form in making great movies, also form in making some pretty bad films. This could be a huge contender, or it could be a total fudge of a film. Do you guys have any early thoughts on Megalopolis?
I am hoping it's a huge contender only because he has put so much of his life into this. Like, I think he started writing it in the 1980s, and he's spoken previously before about how he made other films like Dracula and The Rainmaker to get out of debt because he needed to fund this film. This film is pretty significant to him. So I'm really excited to see it. The cast is amazing. I hope it stacks up and is everything Francis Ford Coppola wanted to make, and is obviously he sees it as the kind of peak of his directing. So I hope it does live up to the hype.
Yeah, it's interesting and like super stacked cast. But we've spoken a little bit about Adam Driver. He had such a funny trajectory where he was like the man for a while, picking all these really interesting projects and doing great stuff. And then he's had a bit of a slide. So it's interesting whether or not this will be like his comeback and Coppola's kind of like, you know, magnum opus, or will it be indicative of the fact that, yeah, he's continuing on this weird trajectory? But I am very excited, and obviously we'll see it. And yeah, you know, we've seen lots of these like late stage directors kind of having a crack at Oscar's glory again. So
yeah, this Megalopolis sort of feels a bit like it could fall into the Napoleon or Ferrari space, which is this director at the latter stage of his career, and it just does not work at all. So that's out sometime in 2024, but the exact release date is unconfirmed. And speaking of Napoleon, Ridley Scott is back already with none other than Gladiator 2. Sans Russell Crowe, who is very disappointed to not be involved. He's made that clear in a few comments and interviews over the past few months. But instead, we have Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal starring in this film. It's supposed to be released in November. We don't have many details on this. We know that it is not based on the screenplay written by Nick Cave all those years ago. But, I mean, look, Ridley Scott, like, Napoleon didn't land for a lot of people, but it was still a well-made movie with great action set pieces. Paul Mescal, people like him. White people really like him. Denzel Washington, white and non-white people really like him. So this movie has got something for everyone.
Well, I'm pretty sure Napoleon was Mel's favorite film of the last 12 months. So she's like obviously obsessed.
Look, no, I'm not. I like, obviously, Gladiator is a fantastic film and I do love it. But 2023 was the year for big films about men doing things.
You're broed out, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't think I need Ridley Scott on Gladiator 2. Like, I don't think we need it, and I don't think it will land, and I know you're joking about me liking Napoleon, but I do think if his form in Napoleon is carried through to this film, I'm not super excited about it. Like, I can predict what it will be like. Lots of gory battle scenes, some beheadings, lots of kind of big crowds cheering, and then dark, brooding Paul Mescal not saying much, probably a nice female character who is not really being championed, a nice female character to bring out the softness and to give a love angle to it. I don't know. I think I want to be wrong and I want it to be a film that we need, but I don't know if it is one.
The one that I'm probably the most excited for is a film called Blitz. It's directed by Steve McQueen, who is, I think, one of the underrated directors of the last few years, to be honest. His film Widows with Viola Davis is one of the best sort of heist movies around that I don't think was watched enough. He also released this anthology, Small Axe, a few years ago, I think in the middle of COVID. It was 5 of the best films like this century. He is a awesome, awesome director. And Blitz is a World War II drama set in London during the Blitz. It stars Saoirse Ronan. Release date for this also not confirmed, but this is the one that I'm personally most excited about, and also the one that I think could like legitimately be a real Oscar contender, just because of the topic, the combination of McQueen in that topic, and Saoirse Ronan, who we know the Academy enjoys and is nominated before. So I think, yeah, like Gladiator 2, these kind of big actiony ones, there's a chance if they work, they might pull off. But out of the movies we know that are being released so far this year, I reckon Blitz is it's got a strong chance. You guys got any vibes on Blitz?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess my only takeaway is that if historical films or kind of more recent history films are back in vogue, thinking of Oppenheimer and World War II, then yeah, this probably has a lot of Oscar bait written all over it.
The other one that is coming out very soon, April 18th, Challenges, Luca Guadagnino's film, delayed because of the strikes last year, starring Zendaya in a sexy tennis love triangle. Zendaya actually coming out to Australia in a couple of weeks for the premiere in Sydney. You excited about that?
I'm very excited about that. I love tennis and I love Zendaya and I love Josh O'Connor. They're coming out here for the premiere, which is like in late March, so before the rest of the world gets it. And no doubt that'll be a huge deal. Obviously, the whole cast is coming out. And as you said, I feel like hype has been building for a really long time. It was one of those films that like the trailer dropped and it was very like risque and everyone was like sending it around and people were super hyped. And then obviously the momentum was killed off when it got delayed. But yeah, I think I'm very keen and we all love his work.
Yes, I love his work, all the repressed desire, usually hot weather, the kind of quite vivid colouring. Oh, I think this is going to be probably a standout film of the year for me.
Best tennis film since Match Point. Yeah.
They love making sexy tennis movies.
Tennis is, yeah, but tennis is pretty sexy.
Yeah, the back and forth, the noises, the
outfits.
Yeah.
Mel, you've got a couple of other films you wanted to shout out that you're excited about. I'm going to say early that I don't think any of these have any Oscar buzz whatsoever. So they're weird additions. They're weird additions to this list. But if you just want to mention some nice movies that you are excited for, you're more than welcome
Okay, well,
to.
I am excited for you to eat your hat in next March. Okay, I don't fully agree. I reckon Furiosa could have a bit of Oscar buzz about it. Like, people are going to like that.
Industry category.
Okay, so I didn't know that we were predicting like what's going to win best costume and hair and
No,
makeup.
exactly.
That's a,
Okay, cinematography, that's a big category. I reckon Mad Max could get a best film nomination. There you go.
yeah, so tell us about Furiosa.
Furiosa, this is the fifth
prequel.
in the series. Yeah, both the prequel and sequel. It's about the origin story of Furiosa. Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Hemsworth. I mean, I feel like we've been talking about this for years and it's been kind of, the release has always been a bit unsure. It is coming out this year. Are you guys Mad Max heads? Maybe that's why I'm so backing this.
No, I loved Fury Road. I thought it was amazing. And I guess I'm not on the Anya Taylor-Joy train as much as other people. This early trailers of this one, the CGI and the effects don't look as good as Fury Road, but I also know that sometimes trailers are like a little bit rough and maybe I just need to wait to get blown away in the cinema. Though I did see the trailer for this at IMAX before watching Dune and it just didn't really land for me that much, but I trust George Miller and I do like the Mad Max world, so I'm coming in with open eyes. I'm ready to be wowed.
Good. And maybe they're just managing expectations. And look, the other one I had on the list, which I agree is not an Oscar nomination film, but I wanted to just shout it out because I'm excited to see this one. Fall Guy, which is the new Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt. If their chemistry at the Oscars was anything to go by, I'm like looking forward to this film. He plays a stuntman who's filling in for an actor who has gone missing, and he kind of gets wrapped up in the mystery. It obviously has quite a big impact here because they closed down the Harbour Bridge for a day, and everyone was kind of upset about it. So I'm excited to see Sydney again in a film, and I think Ryan Gosling, funniest actor at the moment going around. So yeah, I reckon that will have a lot of buzz.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very excited for that. And yeah, seeing Ryan Gosling on the Harbour Bridge will be good. But I actually have one that I think is going to be really good and will also be maybe like a potential Oscars bolter. This will shock you, but it's being made by A24. and it is Civil War, so the new Alex Garland film coming out April 26. Basically, it's kind of like, set just in the near future, and the US has fallen into a state of civil war. It's very much like cherry picked from recent history to create this kind of like very meta film. Obviously, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a US presidential election this year, and so like,
when's it on?
late November. Is that right? Did I get it right?
They're always in November.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
But no, like I feel like it's coming at a really interesting time. It's got a great cast: Kirsten Dunst, Jesse Plemons, Nick Offerman, and Kaylee Spenny. The thing I think is really interesting is I have had this feeling for a long time that we're like soon to enter the real era of Jesse Plemons. Like, he is such a great actor. He picks such interesting roles. Like, I know it's not exactly he's like a new find, and he has previously been nominated for an Academy Award in 2022 for Best Supporting Actor. But I just have this feeling that, it could be a bit of a bolter for the Oscars next year. And I feel like Plemons is like perhaps going to be the next generation's Pacino or De Niro. He's got that kind of range. So yeah, I reckon Civil War could be a big deal this year.
Yeah, it's a really good shout. The trailer is really fascinating, and it has that sort of haunting thing of being like, well, basically everything they're talking about, I feel like, is ripped from the headlines, but they're projecting it forward in a pretty dark way. So I'm really excited for that film.
But also, that's the other thing. Like, the Oscars love that maybe they'll both get nominated. They can go together. Like, it's all like kind of written in the stars. And then there was one other I wanted to mention, and that's Back to Black. So that's a biopic about Amy Winehouse. We've seen Amy's kind of like tragic story on screen a few times in docos and stuff, but this is a proper, biopic. Marissa Abella is playing Amy Winehouse, and it's being directed by Sam Taylor Johnson. This really could go one of two ways. It could be like, just one of those great like stories, like a kind of Freddie Mercury type thing, or it could be a weird knockoff. I will personally watch it because I loved Amy Winehouse, but yeah, remains to be seen if it'll be any good. That hits screens May 10.
I mean, getting the director of 50 Shades of Grey to do this is such a curveball choice, but I loved Amy Winehouse. I'm very interested to see this story brought to the big screen. So again, I'll withhold expectations, but I think you're totally right that this could just be a mess.
And then I guess the only other obvious one is Bad Boys 4, which is June 14th. Yeah, I know you will see that, Osman.
I've definitely seen it. This was not supposed to be a list of movies that I'm excited to watch in the movies. It was supposed to be a list of movies that could win Oscars. You guys went totally rogue. Thomas stayed on brief a bit more. Fall Guy. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I clearly missed the brief, but I bet we'll be talking about the Fall Guy soon.
And yeah, Fall Guy and Furious are both filmed in New South Wales, which is cool and exciting, and a bit of a fun renaissance for Australian film production. So excited for all of those. All right, let's move on to the big topic of today's episode, the royal shenanigans underway. I'll admit, and you can make fun of me if you want, I was like pretty oblivious to this furor around Princess Kate Middleton's disappearance until this frenzy around the allegedly altered photo started sparking 100 conspiracy theories, became the only thing I saw on my social feeds, and was inundated at work with conversations about it, people asking me what I thought was going on. So I realized I had to pay a bit of attention to this one. I thought the way we could structure this is maybe we'll talk about the photo situation itself, which has kind of captured everyone's imagination, and then explain a bit of how we got here. So on March 10, it's just a few days ago, a family portrait of Kate and her 3 children was posted to the Prince and Princess of Wales Instagram account. It's normal stuff. That's what people do on Instagram. The caption thanked the public for their support and wished them a happy Mother's Day, because in the UK, Mother's Day is in March. The photo credit, it had that cute little, camera icon that people use when they're like crediting a photographer, was signed the Prince of Wales 2024. So presumably that's the family. William's taken this photo and they've uploaded it to Instagram. All great, normal, royal family stuff. Then the British media starts rolling out that photo because it was one of the first that they'd seen of Kate in a couple of months. Then very quickly, and this is something that happens in media not that often, but when it does, you stand up and pay attention. The AP, the Newswire service, issued a kill notice, which is such a dramatic term. Journalists love using extremely dramatic terms, though perhaps in this instance it was literal as well as metaphor. They said that this photo had been digitally altered, it had been manipulated at its source. They couldn't trust its authenticity, so they said that it should no longer be distributed. They were like basically pulling it back from publication, and all of a sudden things went crazy because this is a photo of the royal family that major news networks, which previously ran with it, are now saying should not be out there. It is fake. That is when people started pointing out that there are a lot of weird things with this family portrait. There were glitches on the sleeve of her daughter Charlotte. Charlotte's cardigan looked like it had been manipulated. All these different little things that I'm sure that we can explain. But this is where I wanted to pause for a second, because while some of this is a bit wacky, it becomes weirder when you understand the context to this. And I need one of you guys to help me out here. Like, how did just one photo of Kate become such a big issue?
I am ready to step up to the plate. This actually reminds me of Succession, like when we used to have the fun fact music, like the kind of I'm okay. Well, I think this dates back to, cast your mind back to December 25, Christmas Day. You were probably having turkey, Thomas.
Yeah,
And
correct.
Catherine's last public appearance, she was out and about walking with the rest of the family to greet the public, as she does. So that was December 25. That's the last time we've kind of seen Kate do a royal duty. Then on December 28, kind of everyone's a bit curious. They see a royal motorcade go past, heading towards a hospital in London. It's noted, but not too much detail about it. January 17, royal family comes out and they say Catherine's in hospital. She's had abdominal surgery the day before. They've said it's been successful. She won't be returning to public duties until after Easter, March 31.
It's a long break.
That is a long break, but have you ever had abdominal surgery?
No, like I thought it sounds like an appropriate break, but that's a long time. Like it must be a big surgery.
Yeah, Dr. Mitchell. Okay, we know Catherine. Everyone's a bit curious about what abdominal surgery is, like, well, what specifically was going on. They didn't give any more details. We know that Will went to go visit Catherine a few times. Then around January 20th, late January, some kind of reports come out in Spain that Catherine's condition was worse than reported, that she was hospitalised on December 28, and that was what the motorcade was about. Then more reports kind of come out from this one journalist in Spain saying she was in a medically induced coma. Royal family fights back about this. They announce that she's released from hospital, she's recovering in Windsor. They deny those reports, which is quite rare for the royal family to do, but they do come out and deny it. And then essentially, really, we haven't seen or heard much from her until the photo saga, which you outlined. We know she left Windsor to go and spend the school holidays with the children. But other than that, she's not really been seen or heard of. So I guess the groundwork was laid for all of this to explode when this photo was released and people started to think it had been manipulated.
And were you guys like much plugged into this? Like, I don't think we've talked about the royals heaps on this podcast or in our personal lives, but was this something that you were like clocking and people in your lives maybe were talking about and speculating on?
Well, yeah, funnily enough, like I personally wasn't plugged into it, but I guess this is how the flow of information works. My wife is from the country, or her family's from the country, and, you know, her grandparents and country people generally, I think it's safe to say, love the royal family. And so my wife 2 weeks ago received a call from her grandmother who was like, this probably happens to you guys too, like when your grandparents know you work in the media, they think you just like have all the information to every news story. So her grandma was like, hey, I'm really curious about where Catherine is. Can you like use your sources to find out? My wife works for like a website that doesn't cover royals. But anyway, obviously you can't say no to your grandparents. So she was like, absolutely got it. Luckily, one of our friends actually is a royal reporter and has just moved to the UK to take up a posting over there. So she called her and basically was like, what's happening with Catherine? And that was, for me, the first time I was like, oh, yeah, this is like really, people are really, I knew that vaguely something was happening with her and that she had surgery. But that was the first time I got clued into like, wow, people are now worried beyond the point of like it being a funny joke about what's going on with her. And I believe that, you know, our friend who's the royal reporter was like, oh, yeah, essentially the intel she had was that the surgery was a much bigger deal than the palace had let people into. And, you know, the recovery was taking much longer. That was all the information she kind of shared.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really, I kind of knew she went into surgery and people were questioning what does abdominal surgery mean, what's happened. But I thought the conspiracy theories about Kate dying or being replaced or getting divorced or any of that, I kind of thought that was an extreme fringe kind of discussion. And it's only really kind of entered into the mainstream. Not that those theories are really getting much airplay, but more kind of the questioning about the palace's handling of this and what actually is going on. It was only with those photos that really came to my attention.
Yeah, so I think that is probably a good point in which to talk about what happened next, because this really set all the conspiracy theories ballistic. So on Monday night, things get really weird. After people have been speculating about what's happened to this photo, it's been killed by AP and other news organizations. Catherine on Twitter, or at least someone purporting to be Catherine, says, like many amateur photographers, I do occasionally experiment with editing. I wanted to express my apologies for any confusion the family photograph we shared yesterday caused. I hope everyone celebrating had a very happy Mother's Day. Signed, C. This is crazy. I'm sorry. Like I totally understand why people who, like your grandmother-in-law, Thomas, or just other people casually following along and like, it's a bit weird, but maybe the surgery is just gone on a little bit longer than it needed to and we don't know what it is. And we'll put a pin in the whole surgery speculation conversation because I think that's something to talk about kind of on its own. But regardless of like what hadn't happened behind the scenes, putting out a photo that was obviously digitally altered as an example of trying to show to the world that she's all okay, having that photo be withdrawn by the media and then admitting that you digitally altered the photo while you've been recuperating from this illness, this idea that Catherine was like the evening before Mother's Day hanging around on Photoshop to edit her daughter's cardigan none of this makes any sense to me. And I think that maybe there's two halves to this conversation. One is like the mechanics of what actually went on. And then the other half, which we alluded to at the start of the episode, is why we can't stop talking about it and what it might say about the way that we fixate on things in kind of modern society right now. But what were your immediate reactions to seeing that tweet, to seeing this level of confusion around this photo?
It was two things. It was the C sign off that threw me. I was like, she doesn't present as a C girl, like just signing off with the casual C.
I honestly, when I saw the C, I was like, who is this? Because I guess this is how little that I like follow royal stuff day to day. I'm like, she's Kate. But then I'm like, now she's Catherine? Like now we have to call her Catherine? That's a thing?
Or just C? Is that what we are comfortable to refer?
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah, so that really struck me. But then I was also struck by the royal family famously tries not to engage with rumours in a direct way like that. Like they're obviously backgrounding journos and have deep ties in the media, but very rarely are they so directly addressing gossip, which kind of did make me question about what is going on in that PR department and how did this happen. In terms of the actual photo editing, I think people are losing their minds a bit over a photo being edited. Like people edit photos all the time. I'm sure every photo they've ever shared has been edited. Not hugely, but they're definitely touching up photos. Like there's no doubt in my mind that when they release a royal family, they're getting out shadows, they're smoothing backgrounds, they're playing up certain colours. The editing never bothered me, and like, yes, it was bad editing and they probably need to, address the person or photographer who did that.
Which is only new to Photoshop. So
yeah. But like, I think the response to the photo editing itself is kind of insane. People are so quick to read something bad into what I think is a pretty normal practice for media.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be an issue if she'd been like at a hospital last week cutting a ribbon. It's all compounded that because no one knows where she is, and so it's like, oh, this is even weirder now. Like the context is important. I thought it was very funny. Like, agreed, the C sign off just was like an added mystery they didn't need. It reminded me of like Pretty Little Lies. I don't know if you guys ever watched that show, but like all the letters came from A.
Yeah. Great show back to a great terrible
yes,
show.
It was a great terrible show. But yeah, it was very odd and definitely didn't do anything to like hose down the rumors that perhaps she's like in a basement somewhere with David Miscavige's wife, waiting to be released sometime in the future. It's all just very strange, and it does make you then like, I guess almost for a lot of people, no doubt this is a reluctant thing that they know about, and yet it is fascinating now because for me, my immediate thing is like, okay, why can't she just then, if she's going to be, obviously she's quite good at Photoshop or she's learning and she's using Instagram, why not jump on like stories and be like, hey everybody, what's up? Like Will's just cooking and like, what are the kids' names? Charlotte and like George and whatever the other one's name is, they're all just playing around, but like we're all good and like here I am and I'm definitely alive. Like it's just all getting like outrageous now.
Yeah, like C would do that. C would just jump on the live story.
Hey, loads of you guys have been asking me like where I am. Just go full influencer.
I agree with a bit of what you're saying, Mel. Like some of the stuff on social media is both hilarious and ridiculous. People are like, I know what they've done. They've taken the portrait photo of Kate from Vogue and they've angled it differently and used that to construct her. And everyone's like, you figured it out. I'm like, that to me seems ridiculous. Her face is her face, right? Of course it looks similar to a photo she took like a year ago or whatever. Like it's her face. That's it's not going to change drastically. And people who are used to posing for photos have a similar pose that they strike. So it'd be ridiculous to be like, well, it doesn't fit in. It's the same person. But at the same time, I don't think it's weird to stop and dwell on it for a second because what is in your sort of chain of events that you think is totally normal? After months of this weird absence, they feel the pressure to post a photo. They choose to do it on Mother's Day. William, according to the credit caption on Instagram, takes the photo and then airdrops it to Kate, who then opens up her photo manipulator app, touches up like the positions of the bodies, and then sends it out. Is that normal? That's not normal.
Okay, my question to you, I would question the weirdness of the absence. They have said that she won't be back to duties till March 31. We know she went into hospital in kind of early January. We know she came out late January. They've always said she won't be back to work till March 31. So I don't actually know if the absence is that weird, right? If this Spanish journalist and those reports hadn't come out to kind of throw doubt on the absence, wouldn't you just be like, she's had some serious surgery? I don't know. I know people who have had hip replacements and it takes them that long to get back out and about. Like, isn't that, if you have major invasive surgery, yeah, you're probably going to be out for a few weeks. And they've said she's had major surgery. And what is she? Out for a few weeks. But in saying that, I don't want to be like a killjoy because I love when the internet gets on these things, but I wouldn't take it much further than the internet just having a really fun time. Like, the internet is a place where people get behind these kind of moments. And I do think you see a lot of creativity and joyfulness on the internet on these kind of occasions. And the New York Magazine had a really good quote where they were like, when we hear hooves, it's more interesting to think it's zebras than horses. And I think that kind of sums it up. Like, it's just an internet culture moment, I think, that we're all getting excited about. We're all having a lot of fun with. It's got everything we need from an internet conspiracy theory. So I understand and I celebrate the internet for doing its thing at the same time as I'm like, guys, they've said she'll be away. She's still away. Like, they release a photo that someone has badly edited, but that doesn't mean she's dead.
Sounds like something that
Nice
someone on the
try.
internet would say.
Yeah. Nice try, Charles. Like, what are you talking? No, I think, yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about the internet side of things. I'm not letting you off the hook that easily. I think there's more royal stuff here to unpack, but I think you're right. Like, kind of half the reason or more we've ended up at this point is because this is how things work now, right? And I think one thing crystallized it for me. I saw someone share a tweet from another account that was doing like micro level analysis of the shadows on all these other photos. And that person happened to be a Taylor Swift stan account. And this person shared it and said, oh man, the Swifties have figured this out. Like, the royals are totally cooked. And that's obviously this acknowledgement that Taylor Swift fans have been for like nearly 20 years now trained to find Easter eggs and codes and all these little things on everything that a celebrity, in this case Taylor, releases to piece together the puzzle and figure out what's really going on. And even at the Oscars this week, you just see the way that we consume an event now isn't just by watching it on TV, or it's not even just by watching clips. It's by looking at everyone's Instagram account who was there, everyone's TikTok account who was outside, trying to see what people are wearing, who they're talking to. There's a clip of Marty Scorsese is talking to Lily Gladstone, and someone said, well, if you look at the way he's gesticulating his hands, it looks like he's counting all the times he's been nominated and has lost. Other people saying that Emma Stone whispered he's such a prick when Jimmy Kimmel made fun of it. Like, this is the way in a media culture where we are saturated by content, by photos, by videos, and audiences have been trained or just have nothing else to do other than harmlessly, most of the time, hyperanalyzing these things. That then gets transferred to this situation where, because I guess of like the history of secrecy around the royals, the history of conspiracy, and honestly, the history, like particularly around Princess Diana, of accusations of nefarious behavior. I think the collision of those two things has made this such a crazy thing. So that's kind of why I agree with half of you, Mel, half of you. I don't know which half, but I half agree. That's why I half agree with you, because it is a sort of harmless internet thing. But what if all this training that internet pop culture sleuths have been doing on things like the Oscars, on things like Taylor Swift, is now stumbling onto a very real issue for the royals?
Well, the issue I think it's stumbling onto is probably how they handle PR. I think this is a big lesson for a legacy institution about how to handle new media. But you tell me, Oz, what do you think they are stumbling onto?
I've just been waiting to bring up this Reddit thread I was on about Prince Louis's hand formation last night.
Yeah.
It is weird. What is this symbol that
Yeah,
he's
it's
doing?
obviously
Like,
some kind of
what does their
subliminal
finger
cry
look
for
like?
help where it's like some kind of thing from outer space where he's like, this whole family is fucking mental, please get me out of here. And on the thread I was on, everyone was like posting pictures of themselves trying to do it. No one could do it because obviously it's not real and everything is a lie.
So to answer your question, Mel, like to go back to your point, we don't know what Kate's illness is, and most of me feels really uncomfortable speculating on it. Like there are theories around like what abdominal surgery could be and why it would take her out of action for a long time. I don't really want to get into that, if I'm honest with you. Like and it's not because I don't think the royals are worth interrogating. That's what we're doing, but the ins and outs of a particular kind of surgery, I don't think matter that much, other than to say that's what it could be. It could be complications from a more complicated surgery than we've been let in on, and she's just been out of action for a bit. And so this photo thing is like a harmless accident that speaks to naivety around the media than anything else. But I think what overshadows all of that is this is an institution with both a long-term and very recent history of media manipulation and character assassination, right? Like we have seen and read the way that the palace handled things like Princess Diana to protect Charles. We have seen most recently in the last few years, the Harry and Meghan stuff. This is a big, they call it the firm. It's this big, powerful institution that goes after people that it doesn't like and uses every resource at its disposal to protect people that it does like. And the lack of any detail, even though I don't need to know the kind of whole rap sheet for what happened in hospital or whatever, the fact that in this situation there has been such little detail and the little media engagement there has been so ham-fisted, that being the photo thing, I think raises a lot of questions. I think it's really hard to write this off as a bunch of just accidental, one consequence after another. It just feels too murky given the history of this family.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And but again, realistically, I think this is probably more about how they've handled it than, something that particularly bad that's going on. If something bad is going on, it's probably related to her health. And then you've said you don't want the ins and outs of the health, but you want more. I guess it's a balance between what you tell the public and what you don't tell the public. Because if something bad has happened with her health and they don't want to announce it publicly for whatever reason, then I guess that's acceptable, but this is the fallout from that.
No, I think what I'm saying more is I don't want to speculate on what could have happened, but I also think that the royal family, like with a serving politician or whatever, if they're going through something, there's an obligation on the public, particularly the public who they rule over and who we, whose taxes they benefit from or whatever. There's an obligation from them to tell us what's going on. You don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to benefit from being part of this institution and never have to work a normal job and live in a palace and whatever, and then say, but we're not going to tell you anything that's going on other than these weird photo issues and recalls. That's, I guess, my perspective.
Yeah.
And didn't we get when Charles went into hospital, it was like, he's got a massive prostate's all fucked up. And then they were like, yeah, also he's got cancer.
I do. I think, Oz,
That was word for word the statement.
Wow.
I believe the issue.
That guy got fired who wrote that one. That was he was an intern.
I do think
He's now the guy doing the Photoshops.
Obviously how the King Charles health issue was handled was very different and
I wish they had lied about that.
Yeah, I know. That was too much detail. And the Cancer Council websites have spoken about how they've had huge increase in visitors to their site since that announcement. So it's obviously serving a public education agenda as well. But to Oz's point, I do think it's a bit simplistic to say, like, I think the right to privacy is very important and we should be careful about who we declare doesn't have it, because I do think when you take it away from some people, you open it up to be taken away from the rest of us. And we're in a generation and an era where privacy is not valued and it's not important and we all give it away all the time, and we've got a generation that just doesn't care about it. And Thomas is laughing at me. He shares too much, obviously.
Yeah, and you are so private.
Yeah. But I do think, like, you know, I think the right to privacy is enshrined, right? It's like a human right as well as a law. So, like, I don't think we should stand up and be like, we have the right to know everything about you because you're part of an institution. Yes, I take your point. I take your point that they serve the people and, you know, this is an institution that protects them. They do owe us something. But I guess I do worry about just saying she should go into all the details about the health when, for me, I'm kind of comfortable with sitting with the fact that she had probably major surgery and isn't well. Like, I don't really need to know what it is. I hope she gets better, but I don't know if we are owed and should feel that we are owed more than that. And I think people need to be careful about being like public figures, even if they are taxpayer-funded, sponsored, need to tell us more about themselves. Like, I think that's a slippery slope and it worries me.
What do you think about the fact that even if that is a fine principle, that when there's an information vacuum and when people are doing their pop culture kind of sleuthing on this and creating conspiracy theories, and even if some of them seem obviously ludicrous, but they are getting traction, they could be easily killed, like Thomas suggested. Hey guys, I'm C, just going live on Instagram here. Like, they could be dealt with by the release of more information or photos or videos. The absence of that, does that not create some sort of harm, or is it not corrosive in some way to just let the sort of field be flooded with random TikTokers, Instagrammers, or whatever? Or do you think that this one is ultimately like a bit of harmless fun? Who really cares what people post or what sort of Reddit threads get traction?
No, I mean, I think that I'd love to see C come out and do that. But I also think that people's release of information shouldn't be based on what TikTokers and Instagrammers are doing. Like, how bad a precedent is that to set, that just because the public, I mean, is it any different to cancel culture but directed in a different way? Just because the online masses want something, well, we now need to give it to them to counteract what's going to happen. Like, that's kind of bullying, right? Like, I do take your point that, you know, the PR has not been handled well on this, but I don't necessarily think they should cave just because that's what the people want. Like, that's not a good precedent either. Otherwise, like, imagine the information we could get out of people if we started these kind of campaigns.
Well, I mean, this is the other side to it. It is often how the media operates, right? Aside from social media, like a lot of how we get information from people, and a lot of people don't necessarily like this, and there are some outlets that do this way more than others, but it is sometimes in the celebrity space about hounding someone day in, day out until you find out whether that divorce rumor is true, whether they are having a kid, whether they are experiencing substance abuse issues or whatever. Like, that has been part and parcel of this world for so long. And I guess it seems like what you're saying is like that wasn't good then, and just because it's shifting to social media now doesn't necessarily make it better.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think this is obviously quite a very real issue in the UK as well with the phone hacking scandal and Princess Diana. Like, I do see it all as part of the same illness in society to an extent.
How much did Will pay you to say all that as well, out of curiosity?
I'm getting a job with the Royals, guys. Little George.
I guess the interesting thing for this is like where it goes next. And I think without more information, honestly, without like a live video where she's holding the newspaper of the day and like responding to people like a streamer or something like that, like unless she jumps on Twitch and is like playing Fortnite and responding to people in real time, I don't think these rumors are going to go away. Do you guys just see that there'll be more of this stuff? Are you going to continue to follow it and read these things? Or do you think it's reached like a bit of the fact that like old people on podcasts are talking about it like us? It's like, it's not cool anymore. So let's all move on.
She'll probably do like a sit down with Oprah at Tyler Perry's house in like Calabasas. And then that will be her big comeback. No, it's true. Like, I think what Mel said, as is so often the case, begrudgingly, was actually very smart and wise. But I do think that like the context and history of the family makes this particular situation very different, particularly, as you said, like their history with, you know, the female members of the family, especially marrying into the family. So like, I really do understand. I personally don't care. I'm sure she's fine. And just, I don't know, maybe she's like got, Photoshop for Dummies open right this very second. But like, I do understand that now, especially with all these like additional things happening, why people are like, okay, this was like funny at first, but now it's a little bit like, what's going on here? This is pretty weird. And perhaps it is worth the royal family like just addressing it in a way that like kills the story dead, so you don't have people continuing to speculate. And it might set a dangerous precedent, but it's not really going to happen to then everyone else. But like the royals are perhaps one of the few institutions that deserve that kind of treatment, I think.
I think it's been so badly PR handled up to now. But if I was like the crisis comms called in at this moment, I think I think this story will die out on its own. The internet has like a goldfish mind. It will be on to the next thing.
Yeah, something else will
in
happen.
a second,
like today
Taylor
or
Swift
tomorrow,
will get
right?
engaged and it will
God,
die
I hope
out
not.
in a second. So if I was crisis comms coming on now, I'd say C has to be above this. And the only way to keep her above this is to keep her out of it. And the only way to keep her out of it is not to address it. When they go low, we go high on Michelle Obama. I would say C says nothing. C turns up on March 31 when she was due to come back to work in perfect shape with a big smile on her face and, oh, yes, I'm feeling much better.
Yeah.
And
Just
so
glitching
forth.
in the corner. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody.
She's like put up a photo of herself like all like glammed up with
Yeah.
Photoshop. And then I think it moves on and it never gets more oxygen by being addressed. The royals like to see themselves as away from the muck, for better or for worse.
One thing I would love to see though, like, wouldn't you just love to be a fly on the wall at Harry and Meghan's house listening to the chat on this? Like, oh God.
Yeah, Megan's like offering them advice.
I reckon you're probably right, Mel. I think they're probably counting down till the release of the Tortured Poets Department, like April 19th, and they're like, please, can we change the narrative? My very last question on this, and I think I know the answer because of the things that you said in this conversation, Mel. Do you believe that the royal family had no role in the death of Princess Diana?
Wow. And I was gunning for a job there. Do you... I mean, role is a broad
Don't ask me the question. I'm asking you the
Role
question.
is a
This is a yes or no
broad
question.
term, like kind of responsibility and morality is where do you define it? Like it's a very extensive term. Did they have a role? Yes, obviously they had a role, but the level of that role, who's to say? I'll be taking no further questions.
Well, to make this conversation loop back towards pop culture, I thought it'd be fun to talk about some of our favorite films about the royal family. One of mine is about Diana. It's 2021's Spencer by Pablo Larraín, starring Kristen Stewart. The film's about Diana's crisis she has during the Christmas of 1991 when she's thinking about divorcing Charles and leaving the family. It's a really smart and interesting film. Kristen Stewart gives an awesome performance, and it's almost shot like a horror, which I think captures I guess, a perspective that Diana would have been going through at that time. Maybe that's why I have the feelings that I do about this situation, because I watched that movie not that long ago, and that's thinking about Kate in a similar situation. You know, maybe she's in a Get Out kind of frame or something like that. But it's a really, really, really well-made film. The other one I wanted to shout out, this is your mate, Thomas Yorgos Lanthimos, is The Favourite from 2018. Olivia Colman, Emma Stone, Rachel Weisz. Just super fun, co-written by Australia's own Tony McNamara. Surprisingly, a lot of people I've talked about this movie haven't seen it, but could not give it a stronger rec. I think it's very fun and it's very sexy as well.
Both of those are fantastic films. And I think the Spencer is like highly underrated as well. It
Yeah,
didn't
same. I loved that.
Yeah, it didn't get the attention or the kind of acclaim it deserved.
Mel, why don't you share your recommendations?
Well, maybe this goes to why I think more positively of C's experience. Mine is Maria Antoinette, Sofia Coppola's film. Kirsten Dunst is in it. We've already had a mention on this pod today. From 2006. I don't know. I'm a real Coppola head. I love everything she's done. I know some people.
That's so surprising.
Oh, isn't it? I know some people don't like this film and her style, but I think it's fun, over the top, silly.
I like Sofia Coppola a lot, and I like her style a lot, and I like this film, but I think the worst thing about this film is the whole, like, let's reclaim, like, the narrative of the woman who was actually the victim here when we're talking about Marie Antoinette. And it's interesting you compare that to your attitude to this situation, because I can see how if you're adopting the Pablo Larraín perspective, you're like, well, these people are all crooks trying to murder everyone. And if you're adopting the Sofia Coppola, Marie Antoinette perspective, you're like, well, you're just trying to have a good time and other people are ruining their lives. And can't we just like listen to some indie rock and chill out.
I mean, I don't think that's really the perspective I adopted on this. I think it was quite nuanced and
Okay, you were in year 10 when this film came out.
but-
So let's.
yeah, it has shaped me.
Yeah.
Great royal film.
Thomas, I just saw what you put in the document here. I'm laughing out loud.
I think it's a fucking crime that neither of you picked this movie. And I guarantee our loyal listeners, including all the Thomas heads out there, shout out to you guys, the tens of you out there. I was thinking, why has no one mentioned The Princess Diaries? Easily the greatest royal film of all time, released in 2001. I mean, what more can I say about this film? This was what gave us Anne Hathaway. Was that a good thing? Remains to be seen. But like, this is a legendary film. It was like part of that era when these films still made a lot of money. It made $165 million at the box office, which is like
More than June.
yes, it's crazy. And basically, you know, we all know the story. Anne Hathaway plays Mia, a 15-year-old who discovers that she's actually the princess of a small European state. And then she has to kind of go on this journey to kind of claim her spot on the throne. The Princess Diaries has become one of those weird films that's like weirdly a part of pop culture now. And yeah, I think it was just such a fun movie and led to The Princess Diaries 2, which also made a shitload of money. And then I think they were going to make The Princess Diaries 3, and then Anne Hathaway was like, oh no, I'm actually in good stuff now.
Did you read the books too?
I did not know.
Still time.
I did read the book. Shout out to my friend Renee in high school who would lend me her copies of the books after she was done with them. I wasn't laughing at you mentioning this film, Thomas. I think it is genuinely like a great film, a very fun film. More that I thought you were going to read out the Wikipedia summary that you'd copied and pasted, which just reads hilariously. So I'm glad you didn't do that.
No, that was just more of a
That's
prompt
great.
for me because I haven't watched it since 2023.
That could be a fun one to watch with Archie, your royal baby.
Yes, correct. Oh yeah, that's right, actually.
And look, if that's not enough recommendations for you, we do still have our regular Impress Your Friends segment where we share something that we loved watching, reading, listening to, or consuming in the past week. Mel, why don't you go first?
Okay, mine is, I know I've had a few books and I've received feedback from my colleagues here. I've gone with a TV show this week. Now, if you watched the NFL because of Taylor and you had no idea what was going on or just because you wanted to watch the NFL for the first time, there's a new documentary on Apple TV, The Dynasty, New England Patriots, which is a really great introduction to the NFL over the past decade or so. It does focus on the New England Patriots, which is the team of
Tom Brady.
very good, who is famously the best quarterback of all time, has won more Super Bowls than anyone else in NFL history. It kind of focuses on the franchise since he's been there. It's a bit strangely paced, but it is really good because it looks at how Tom Brady kind of came in as a replacement quarterback. He was a really late draft pick, how he then dominated that team. It covers some of the scandals of the team as well. There was a big cheating furore that broke out. So it's really like interesting look at the state of America through the lens of this team. It kind of, one of the real interesting things is the kind of role the team played post 9/11 and the treatment of American sport during that time. Anyway, it's one of those really interesting sports documentaries that pretends it's about sport, but is about the world generally as well. So,
Any
yeah,
Giselle?
good one. Snapshots of Giselle. She doesn't speak. His dad speaks and his sister speaks and he speaks as well. And they're actually they're quite forthright about him. Like, it's quite a good insight. I mean, we all know he's a kind of maniac in a way, like super competitive, but they do give lots of fun anecdotes of how he's shown that over the years. You can watch it on Apple TV.
I'm cheating. I got two, but they're pretty quick ones. Charlie XCX has released her first single from her upcoming album Brat, which is out on Monday. The single's called Von Dutch, and yes, it is an obvious throwback to the classic fashion brand that we all loved. Thomas, were you a Von Dutch guy?
I was like fucking dripped out in Von Dutch. And to make things even worse, in the year 2000, year of the Sydney Olympics, my family went to Thailand. And so I bought all knockoff Von Dutch, came home. I was like so flammable, so itchy, but just dripping in Von Dutch. I looked like Nicole Richie at Sydney Airport.
That's really funny. Look, this track reminds me of the sounds of that era as well as a lot of late 2000s kind of Ministry of Sound club banger vibes. It's really fun. I've mentioned Charlie XCX a couple of times on this pod. I'm really excited for this album. But if you want a fun Friday night track, give that one a spin. And a little bit of a plea here from people. I've recommended Curb Your Enthusiasm's final season, which is on binge right now before, but it is just getting better and better. It is building up to something extraordinary. There's a lot of theories and guessing. I know that, Mel, you're involved in this as well, that we're going to get a repeat of the infamous Seinfeld season finale. Larry David, who was a writer on that show, co-created the show with Jerry, has been putting a lot of clues in this season as to what he's building up to. Please jump on this. This is a very, 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 very funny and good show.
Yeah, it is. And I envy people who haven't seen any Curb, who get to go and watch all of the seasons all over again, because it truly is a kind of one-of-a-kind show.
It's a great gift. And Thomas, last but not least.
Yes, a surprising one from me this week. I'm actually recommending, I guess, like a new columnist, a series of essays. Basically, J. Caspian Kang is a writer with The New Yorker. You may know his byline from The New York Times. He also has worked on the very successful podcast, This American Life. He has started a new weekly column for The New Yorker called Fault Lines. I sent it to you both on the weekend, his first article, because I thought it was really interesting and really well written. It's called Arguing Ourselves to Death. And basically, he kind of talks about, if he started off by talking about his love of surfing, but really it becomes this, discussion about the ideology of the internet and how, we all talk so much, as we have done today on this podcast, about the good and the bad and the reality of the internet. And he talks in a really interesting and intelligent way about how it's maybe not about whether or not the internet has helped us or harmed us. It's just, it exists now and we have to learn to live around it. But he's a great writer and the column is amazing. And if you're going to check out any weekly column, obviously besides mine, on Sundays in the Sun Herald, then yeah, I would highly recommend this. It's called Fault Lines. The author is J. Caspian Kang. Highly recommend. You can find it in The New Yorker and yeah, you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, really great column. Was very happy that you recommended it. It was an awesome thing to read and I'm hooked in for the rest of them. So thank you. Great Rex team. Great conversations. Sad to not be there in the room with you physically, but hopefully we'll get to go to more movies in the future and I can continue to make fun of Thomas's weird cinema habits.
Yeah, but also we can just take a photo of the three of us and then manipulate it so it looks like we're in the same room.
Very, very, very funny. Take care, guys. Great to chat.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode of The Drop was produced by Chi Wong. If you enjoyed listening to today's episode of The Drop, make sure to follow us in your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend. I'm Osman Faruqi. See you next week.